This is a ManeHustle Media podcast.
All the way from the A, you listen to My Favorite Lesbian on BRQ.
Hey, stay locked in with your favorite lesbian on Black Radical Queer. Yeah.
Hey y'all, this is Javia Nicole, aka your favorite lesbian, and you're listening to Black Radical Queer Podcast, our stories on our own terms. Before diving into this episode, I want to take a moment to tell y'all about Black Radical Queer on Patreon. Patreon is a great way to support the podcast because those contributions help to offset the cost of making this thing happen. So production costs, editing costs, hosting fees, all of the funds from the Patreon go towards supporting that and keeping this podcast moving right on along. Also, there's perks to becoming a patron because you get early access to the episodes and you also get a discount on all BRQ merch. So it's a great way to support. I appreciate my current patrons. And if you want to become a patron, you can do so by going to patreon.com. So Patreon is patreon.com/BlackRadQueer, BLK RAD QWR. Thank you so much for listening, and let's get into this episode. All right, so we're at 5 minutes after, so I want to go ahead and get started because I do want to be respectful of everyone's time. For everyone who, a lot of folks are new to me because of the panelists, so welcome. You probably don't know like who I am or what this is all about, but I do appreciate you joining, and I appreciate everyone that the panelists has basically encouraged and influenced to participate with us. My name is Javia Nicole. I host Black Radical Queer Podcast. For those who listen to the podcast, they know I always start with, hey y'all, this is Javia Nicole. Welcome to another episode of Black Radical Queer. And then I get into whatever the conversation is going to be or the topic is going to be. But today, what we're going to be doing is having a conversation around wellness. So, of course, self-care, but also community care, interpersonal wellness, and what that looks like and how we can kind of really incorporate that into our lives in a tangible way. And it's something that I have spoken to a lot just over the course of the podcast and just in general because of the field that I work in. So that's something that I'll circle back to. What I want to do is allow the panelists to introduce themselves, and then I'll, give a little blurb about kind of my background, and then we'll get into the conversation. And while this is happening, for anyone in the chat, if you have questions, you can go ahead and start dropping questions in the chat, and I will circle back to them. So let's start with Hadiza. If you could introduce yourself to the good people.
How you doing, family? I'm Hadiza Muhammad, pronouns she, her, they, them. And I'm a traditional African and Southern root herbalist, traditional healer. I practice medicine from my father's tribe, who is Nigerian, from the Bori traditions, and also from my matrilineal side, Southern root medicine and voodoo. And I work in the California, but more focused in the Oakland Bay area. And I give spiritual cleanses. I do divination via astrology, cowrie shells. I'm a herbalist, a hands-on healer, and a nutritionist, to name a few. And it's amazing meeting you all and sharing space with you to talk about healing and wellness.
Thank you. So next we will have Bianca. You can go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi everyone, my name is Bianca and my pronouns are they and she. I live in Atlanta and my family is from Jamaica. I also want to name my grandfather, Ronald Davis, in this space because he became a beloved ancestor this week. And a lot of my practices come from the influence he's had on me. So just wanted to lift him up. I'm also a friend of Javia, and so it's an honor to be here today co-creating some magic. And for those not viewing a screen, I just want to describe myself. I have dark skin, I have curly locks and a cute bob. I'm wearing a black compression sleeve on my arm, and I have a black shirt on that says "Schools, Not Prisons." And I've got a lot of bold colored paintings behind me. I coach activists to have their values, self-worth, and capacity respected in movement work. We often think of self-care as an individual responsibility, which doesn't hold organizations accountable in creating healthy workspaces. So part of my job is to work with people to cultivate the liberation that they are fighting for as they are fighting for it. And we do this through deep coaching, affirmation practices, project management, boundary setting. And today I am honestly here to learn from the amazing people on the call and just share a little bit of what I know.
Thank you. And then we also have Ayotunde, who will introduce themselves. And after that, we'll have some reps from BWU introduce yourselves as well.
Hi there, my name is Ayotunde Ikuku. My pronouns are they, them, and theirs strictly. There are no other options. It's just that. I'm Nigerian American. I'm non-binary, and as far as like what I do in community, I work at Gender Health Center, which is a nonprofit organization in Sacramento that focuses on healthcare and essentially alleviating the health disparities that trans folk face, particularly queer trans people of color. Centering the most marginalized is pretty much the core of what we are trying to do and what we are doing now. And in terms of like spirituality and practices, I don't necessarily practice any one thing, but I am heavily influenced by West African spirituality, specifically Ifa. I also have a relationship with the Orisha. For folks who are aware of that, that's the indigenous pantheon of Nigerian folk who practice Ifa. And yeah, I just want to kind of share my perspectives, especially being someone that is queer, being someone that is non-binary and assigned male at birth, because I have a different perspective in a lot of the spaces that I encounter, as well as privileges. And so I just like to have conversations to kind of leverage that.
Thank you. And then, of course, last but not least, we'll have BWU do an intro.
Okay, so my name is Iris. My pronouns are she and her. I'm the Community Outreach Director of Black Women United. It's an organization, for those of you that don't know, who's geared towards the upliftment, advancement, and education of all Black women. And when we say all, we mean all. That includes trans Black women, that includes women from different religions, that includes women, of course, from different sexual orientations and gender identities. But we also want to help protect and uplift Black femme identity. And that may not be just for someone who is assigned female at birth, that is also for those who are assigned male at birth, because we believe that Black femme identity is something to be protected. And I am really excited to have all of you here. I want to take the time to thank Javia for all the work that she's done with helping to coordinate this and bring this together. I want to thank all the panelists for coming here and sharing their perspectives. I want to thank my team for all the help you guys have put in to bring this into fruition. I'm really excited to hear all of you perspectives and also to share space with a Black trans business with Radiating Love with LaShawn Boucher. So thank you for being patient with the technical difficulties, and I'm ready to make some magic here today with you all. Thank you.
Thank you. So I guess I'll just circle back to give a little bit more information. So I mentioned the podcast. I started BRQ in 2018 because I saw what I thought to be a void in media in terms of having some type of avenue vehicle to specifically amplify Black queer voices and to talk about intersectionality and social justice from the perspective of Black queer folks, and particularly uplift Black trans folks, Black femmes. And it was something that was very important to me. It's something that I stress in a lot of episodes. For those who listen, they know I go hard about that. But my background is very much in grassroots organizing and like social justice work. And I shifted from that into, well, still doing that, but it led to healthcare. So I work in healthcare as a patient advocate and a community health worker, so I provide direct support to folks in the community who have chronic health conditions, mental health issues, and substance use disorder. So I work with a large population of folks here in Southern California, and I'm now working toward my licensure for counseling. So I already do counseling, but I'm just kind of trying to get to the next level professionally with that. So that's what I do. And I wanted to do this panel specifically to be able to address wellness from different perspectives and get more of like a holistic and well-rounded view of wellness, because it can seem like a very abstract concept. And I believe in making things very tangible and practical so that we can actually use them in our lives. So before we get into kind of what my questions are for the panel, I want to give folks an opportunity to ask questions. So I like to do this thing that I call a valet. And what the valet is, any questions you have, like you can drop in the chat or anything like that, and they will be parked. And so they're parked in the area that makes most sense. So I do have an outline, and we're going to kind of start with talking about individual wellness and branch out to more interpersonal and community. And so depending on what your question is, it'll go in those categories. And if it's something outside of that, that's fine as well. And I do this because I want to make sure that I can have an outline. It doesn't matter if it's not addressing what you actually want to know. So if you have questions, then I want to focus on those and make sure that they get answered instead of, strictly following an outline and it's not relevant to what you actually want to know. So please feel free to drop questions in the chat. And as we get them, we will, as we get the questions, then, I can see where they fit, or we might just, shift course a little bit and go ahead and answer them, because I want to make sure that happens. So I'll go ahead and get started. Thank you again to all the panelists for being involved. And the first thing that I want to talk about is there's this, concept that I call habituating self-care. And so it's really taking this concept, this abstract thing of self-care, and turning it into something that is a habit, that is something you can use in your daily life. And so this is something I've written about, I've talked about, but the whole concept is for you to have things that you can incorporate into your day-to-day life that function as self-care for you, that don't inconvenience you, that don't extend beyond what your means are, not just your financial means, but your emotional needs and your physical needs and all that, things that are very specific to you that meet what you need. So for instance, when you look at kind of conversations of wellness and things like that, a lot of times what's pushed is this idea of like, go to the spa and get your nails done and go treat yourself to, whatever. And that kind of thing. Yes, those things can definitely count as self-care. You also don't have to spend money to do self-care. And the reality is, in terms of self-care being an accessible thing, everyone does not have the means to go to the spa. Everyone doesn't have the means to, get a massage and get acupuncture and, and all these are great things, but it's just not feasible for a lot of people, and particularly people that I know and all kind of stuff. It's not a financially feasible thing. So does that mean that self-care should not be accessible to those folks? And I just don't think that that's right or that's fair. So some of the things that I've worked with people on kind of in my counseling and stuff like that with ways they can incorporate self-care is, for instance, one of the things is taking a walk or spending time outside. Not only walking, because folks have different abilities. So everyone may not be able to go out and like walk around where they are. So if you're not able to, actually just being able to have time outside, or even if you're inside, being able to have sunshine come in, being able to listen to the sounds of nature, or like, ocean noises, watching something. They have like virtual walks and stuff like that, that different nature organizations will provide. So it's like a video, like a virtual tour thing. So being able to kind of get the benefit of really taking in nature based on what your ability is and what is accessible to you, instead of just saying, hey, go for a walk, hey, go to this trail. What if you don't have the means to get there? What if whether that's like the physical, the ability means, or the financial, the budget, or whatever. So it should be, but that doesn't mean that nature should not be accessible to you. So that's just an example. But I want to ask the panel, what type of things do you feel like folks can do to incorporate self-care into their day-to-day lives, and that in a way that's accessible for various people?
Okay. I feel like deep breathing and meditation is a really amazing and very essential practice that one can do, that doesn't cost a thing, and it can be done practically at any time. It's very accessible, and incorporating deep breathing and meditating with like what you said, I love the whole like nature is is definitely the healer, and not all the time is it directly accessible to us, depending on where we are, or the time and space. So meditations and visualizations are really good practices to put the two together, and just visualizing, because underneath all of the concrete jungle, you still have the roads that grew through the cracks. So there's earth and there's nature everywhere we are. Just some spaces it looks a little different, but visualizing is a beautiful practice to have, that you can do anywhere. You just close your eyes, or if you want to keep your eyes open and look out the window. And there are several different types of breathing exercises that one can do that can really benefit us in our self-care and balance.
Yes, I definitely want to echo all of that. I think connected to breath, I'm also thinking about ways to become fully present in each moment. And so taking the mindfulness that you can achieve with meditation and apply that to the food that you're eating, the breath that you're taking as you're sitting down. Notice your body move, notice your body breathe, notice your body exist. And what are the ways that you can remove distractions so that you can be fully present, whether that is noticing that the food is coming up to your mouth with the spoon, it is entering your mouth. What are the sensations that are going on now that it is against your tongue as it's sliding down your throat? Noticing everything and blocking out the external stimuli can be really grounding. Connected to that, I also think of singing and humming. Humming in particular has been shown to be really powerful because it's a little bit more accessible than singing, and two, it activates like your chest and feels more connected to breathing. The last thing I wanted to say is mantras, and you can have your own mantra, whatever that means for you. I shared earlier for folks who are just joining us that my grandfather passed away this week, and we said mantras till the very end. And one of the mantras that we said together was, I deserve happiness. And so for some folks, it feels hard to conjure a mantra when things feel hard, but even as you are passing away, you can say positive, affirming things to yourself, and it does make a difference. It can bring peace. So I'll end with that.
I can go next. I think for me, I have like a three-prong answer to that. I think first and foremost, like the way capitalism has like imposed itself on us and forced us to navigate it, like you can't not consider like how that affects you and how you are navigating that yourself. And so for me, I am not naturally organized, so I have to make myself organized by having a calendar and scheduling things based on not only like when I literally have time, but also when I just have like the emotional and mental capacity to give to other people. And oftentimes that is more so like business related or like community work. And one thing I'm starting to realize is that I could do the same thing when it comes to self-care, because sometimes we get just like caught up in having to do so many things that self-care just takes the back burner and we procrastinate on our own self-healing. And so being very intentional and being like, this is what I have to do for my kind of like work. And here's me scheduling, even if it's an hour or 2 hours, in a day or on the weekend, this is my self-care time. And during this time, it's just me working on myself and working whatever it is that I'm going through at this time, you know, to the best of my ability. And just doing that and having that moment with yourself very intentionally and even regularly, once you're able to make it consistent, will make all the difference when it comes to your own inner healing and truly just how you interact with other people. Because if you're constantly stressed and putting your self-care on the back burner, your relationships are going to fail regardless of how you feel about people, because you're just not going to have the capacity to not only show up for yourself, but to show up properly for other people. The second part to my answer is that you can have grounding visualizations. So yesterday I had a really good therapy appointment, and my therapist is also Black, queer, and spiritual. And so she, at the very beginning of the session, had me do this grounding exercise, kind of like what Bianca was talking about, being grounded and centered, uh, before we started talking about anything. And what she did is she had me do breathing exercises and close my eyes and picture essentially like roots coming from the core of Mother Earth wrapping around my feet, and those roots giving me energy, and to picture myself doing that. And it was very easy for me to kind of just picture my body and picture these roots coming from the core of Earth, wrapping around me, giving me this energy that I felt that I needed to be replenished, that Earth always has, because our planet is a very powerful planet in itself, and heals itself. And so why wouldn't it be able to kind of wrap around you and share its energy with you and kind of be whole in that moment when you feel like you don't have that energy in that current state? And that made um, that kind of set the tone for the rest of the therapy meeting. And I really felt like so much lighter. And I was thinking of my ancestors as we were doing the breathing exercises, because it was just like, you know, sometimes things just feel so heavy, but then there's also the fact that, like, thinking back to kind of history and like in your own personal history, like shit was hard back then and you thought you weren't going to be here today, but look at you, you somehow made it. And so that's a testament to the fact that it can happen again, and that it's natural to have an ebb and flow of things in life anyway, the same way it goes with life and death. Like, you're guaranteed, if you're living right now, you're guaranteed to be living, and that means you're guaranteed to die. And that's just the fact. And so how are you going to work towards that, and how are you going to reframe what that looks like for yourself? And the very last part, because I don't want to take up too much time for the next person, one personal thing that I also do is an affirmation board. And so I have this like dry erase whiteboard on my wall. It's like directly across from me. And I'm willing to read what I have on there just to give folks kind of an idea. Um, and so for me, I change the board up probably like 2 or 3 times a year, just to be like very intentional about like what it is that I'm trying to manifest and like tell myself and remind myself of. And oftentimes I change the list prior to me having a psychedelic kind of intentional healing experience with myself. I usually shroom or do other things a couple of times a year to kind of reset myself. And so the most recent thing that I have on my board are just things that I'm already working on or have kind of achieved, but want to continue manifesting in my life or wanting to reach. And so on my board, I have like 6 things, just very basic. I have a healthy love. I have intimate sex. I have marriage reclamation. I have spiritual growth. I have lasting bonds. I have individual and romantic growth. And then the last line is just life. And so for me, if I feel like I'm lost or anything like that, I have that board there and I can look back at what it is that I'm working towards and how far I've come if I feel like I haven't made any progress towards those things. And I can be like, actually, I have, even thinking about them as progress. But that's my very long answer to that question.
Thank you. I actually wanted to circle back.
Thank you. Oh, you're muted.
My bad. So I actually wanted to circle back to something really quick. So let me see. For one, there is something that someone mentioned in the chat that I wanted to bring up. So let's see, this is, and y'all, I'm looking at my phone so I can see the chat, because I can't see it on the computer because my vision is terrible. So Sarah Michael said, I recently read that anxiety is physical, so it needs a physical response, for example, walking or exercise. So that's something I wanted to speak to. So there are, of course, many different ways that we can address anxiety. I think, for one of the things I want to say about anxiety, there is a lot of stigma around it. And people kind of think that it presents in a very specific way, when it can manifest in many different ways. And then it's also something that, in terms of the psychology behind it, a lot of times is looked at in a very gendered way. And so that may do a disservice to some people. I definitely I did an episode on anxiety, actually, because I had the experience of essentially being dismissed and told that like what I was experiencing was not anxiety because it was not presenting in the way that it was expected to present in folks who are female or woman or assumed to be those things. And so I ended up kind of just doing my own research and stuff like that. And I'm just like, okay, no, this absolutely is anxiety. So it definitely does make sense that, of course, like, anxiety is in the body. So like you do something physical. One of the things I've found is that combining things can help. So not just doing something physical, but also having, like, let's say music. Music is a huge thing for me. Like if I can put on my headphones and listen to some music, it can shift my entire mood. Specifically putting on headphones and doing it because it's a different type of immersive experience. Or if I'm in a space where I'm kind of like by myself, or I'm able to blast the music, whatever, something where I'm able to listen to it in a way that tunes out other things, and combining that with the physical. So exercising, but having on my headphones, or going for a walk and having on my headphones and listening to the music so that I'm tuning out all the other stuff. It helps to reinforce that physical piece that Sarah mentioned. So I definitely feel like doing something physical does make a difference. And even if you're experiencing like emotional anxiety is kind of more based off of an emotional stimulus or a physical, whatever, regardless, doing something with your body helps to kind of really distract yourself. And our brains are powerful, but they're also malleable, so it's kind of like we can shift our brain fairly easily. It's like, it's this real powerful thing, but it can be like sway, like, okay, look, I don't want you to be on that right now. So I'm going to do something and really to just flood your brain with not only the endorphins that come from the activity, but just really kind of like distractions or other things to focus on outside of whatever is creating the anxiety. The other thing that I wanted to speak to was Ayotunde mentioned a calendar. And I'm someone who, I say I'm a recovering perfectionist and a recovering procrastinator. I was a terrible procrastinator. Now I am like the poster child for structure. Like I'm all about it. I'm like, what? You're not on my calendar? I don't know what to tell you. Like I can't fool with it if it ain't on my calendar. But one of the things that we do, we look at, like, we schedule these times with folks. We put a lot of effort and energy into kind of the things we do with other people, and we do not grant ourselves the same grace and courtesy. So if I can schedule time with Iris, I can schedule time with myself. If I can schedule time with, my doctor or whoever, I can schedule time with my supervisor to have a one-on-one, I can schedule time with myself. Why are we the last priority when it comes to the scheduling of time? We prioritize like disseminating our time to everybody else, and then we are on the back burner and we get the scraps. And I'm very much opposed to that. As someone who, is like recovering from it or whatever, I'm very opposed to that. Our time for ourselves, which is a big part of that self-care, needs to be prioritized. And we can't we can't look at it in a way like it's less than. Like if I know I got to talk to Iris at a certain time, I'm not going to just kind of at the last minute say, you know what, never mind. Like I'm not going to put that on the back burner because something else, unless it's like some kind of emergency pops up, I'm not going to dismiss that. So I need to treat myself the same way. If I say I'm doing my bath ritual at this time, if somebody's like, oh, are you available? No, I'm not available. At that time, I have an appointment with myself. And if you have to look at it like an appointment or something with yourself, that's totally fine, but we should prioritize it. That should be just as important as my meeting with these other people or my work meeting or whatever. It shouldn't be looked at as something that's negligible or like it's optional. Like, oh, I can cancel that to do something else for this other person. Absolutely not. So on my calendar, I add that stuff too. I'm doing a staycation's on the calendar. Do not disturb, that kind of like that stuff is all important. So I just wanted to circle back to those things because they're very important. And I think we can, all the things that the panelists mentioned, like we can incorporate into basically those appointments with ourselves. So it's like being deliberate, and it also holds you accountable to yourself. If I can put stuff with other people on the calendar, there's a level of accountability that comes with that. Why am I not accountable to myself in the same way? So I can put this on my calendar. I'm getting the reminders, just like I'm getting reminders about, hey, you got to do this panel. Hey, you need to respond to this email, whatever. Hey, you need to go sit down somewhere and take some time to yourself. I need to set those reminders, and I need to be accountable to myself if I don't follow through, just like I would be accountable in any other situation if I don't follow through.
That was beautiful, Javia. Thank you. I love how you word things and put them together, and it just makes sense immediately. I tend to overbook myself, so I start school tomorrow, and you reminded me I need to be scheduling that time for breaks and naps and even snacks and lunches, because I do forget to eat when I'm busy and in the midst of it all, especially with them spiritual baths. Once a week, we got to do it.
So
Okay.
something I wanted to ask the panel about is basically, because we're kind of in this unprecedented time since we're dealing with COVID. And so I know for me personally, COVID has absolutely impacted what I do and don't have access to for my self-care. Probably my number one thing that I do for my self-care, which is go to the beach, because the ocean, I don't know, for me, the ocean is a game changer. Like, ain't nothing touching it. It's like when I get there, I'm like, I feel so small. Like, all that other stuff don't matter, whatever. Like, look at this beautiful thing, so I'm just like, it's very immersive for me. So that has been impacted. So I've had to really get creative and modify some of my self-care stuff. So for the panelists, like, I want to ask you all, and for people to drop in the chat too, because y'all got this chat popping. I keep looking over at it like, okay, y'all say some good stuff. So what things have you done? Like, have you had to do anything differently in regards to your self-care regarding COVID? Have you had to make any modifications? Have you discovered any new things for self-care that you didn't do before that you like kind of had to make accommodations because of COVID? So I'm just curious to know what you all, like, for the past several months, what you all have been, going through and how you've modified your self-care accordingly. And then if you could let people know too where you are, because it hasn't been the same across the board. I'm in Los Angeles, and I've been like on clank lockdown since like March. So I can probably count the number of times I've been somewhere for real, like on one hand or something. So I'm just curious to know like where you are and how your self-care has adapted to COVID.
I can share. So I'm in Atlanta, which, they like don't even believe in COVID, but I do. So it's made it particularly scary to go outside because I love to go for walks, and at least twice now, a neighbor has tried to approach me and be like, hey, do you mind if I ask you a question? Hey, do you mind? Why are you wearing a mask? That's dangerous. It's like, well, we've had this conversation before, and it's still me and it's still the pandemic, so I'm just gonna keep walking and wishing you wellness. And so that's what it's been like. Still wanting to take my walks. They are super grounding for me, but other folks are in various places and we don't have any leadership getting us all on the same page. So that's been one thing. And journaling is one of my favorite practices. And when I ran out of all my journals, I was like, oh my God, I have to venture outside. I've got to spend extra money and get it shipped in. And I really grappled with that because I'm used to making my self-care on a budget. And I was like prioritizing all these other things. And I was like, wait, I need to survive this pandemic. So if I'm no longer buying like dollar journals from like the Dollar Tree because I'm afraid to go in, I'm gonna have to just invest $5 and get something from Target shipped because my mental health is actually worth it. And so the fact that I was grappling with spending $5 versus $1 for months was like wild. But I'm glad that I did it and stocked up. Something that I came across was the Liberate app, and I can type it in the chat for folks, but it is a people of color focused and created app filled with meditations, guided meditations. And the last thing is like creating solo days. I think even when you're on lockdown, it's hard to imagine that you can go on vacation or go anywhere, but you really can. And I'm down to talk to anybody else about that a little bit more.
Listen, I for the first few months of COVID, I really didn't do anything, and after a while, I was just like, I can't live like this. And so we around 4th of July, my wife and I planned a staycation, and we literally went to somewhere that was like less than 20 minutes away, and stayed in a hotel and stuff like that. And we still were by ourselves, and weren't around crowds or anything, but even having that change of scenery, it made a huge difference for me mentally. And so now I've made that a regular thing since this is going on, because I do like to travel and all that. And even though we can't really go many places and we can't fly, we can still do our little staycations. We can still go for a walk in a different area. So there are like some different options, and just trying to get more creative with the things that we do as an outlet. But definitely the staycation, like we have one coming up, and my soul is so ready. My soul is very ready. And then something I wanted to mention, because I'm seeing this chat. So since I haven't been able to go to the beach, like I'm planning to go because they made some guidelines that make me feel more comfortable, and I'm just going to go hopefully when nobody else is there. But so I definitely have made sure that I like make it a habit to get time in the sun, even if it's just sitting on my patio, getting some kind of sunlight consistently throughout the week. And honestly, because I see folks saying like, oh, well, like baths, masturbation and stuff like that. Listen, more sex. I ain't gonna front. I've been having much more sex during COVID. And that has not been a bad thing. So that has definitely been incorporated into my self-care and my mutual care with my wife. But yeah, I'm like, it's COVID and dirty 30s don't really, mesh, but they kind of do because we're at home more. So now I'm like, hey, we both in the dirty 30, like shit is real. So I'm like, let's get this popping. Man, y'all, like, and all the time that we've been together, this is probably the most, it's been kind of ridiculous. So like that has helped. That has definitely made a difference.
We love to see it. I know I'm not a panelist, but I'm trying to co-host and not be so anxious. But candles, like Bianca said, especially from IKEA, because you can get so many for cheap and they're really good. It just helps me to feel more calm and collected, and like to have that power source near me. Also helps me to not feel so alone sometimes during these times. So yes to the candles. And Javi just reminded me I need to be taking sunbathing walks ASAP. So thank you, Javia.
I know for me, when COVID first hit, it was hard because a way that I do self-care is through going out and being with nature and being with those that I love. And but it took sometimes that for me to realize how much I was working and how much I was going all the time to where I almost felt uncomfortable with being so still um, and with myself. But then what really helped me was I got more time to prepare food and to really cook and make that into a routine, or make that into a ritual. And another thing that I also did was made like a dream board. And so all of the things that I want to do or wanted to do this year, given, the shelter in place or COVID didn't happen, I wrote it down or found pictures and things that I would like to do, once everything is safe and settled. And that really helped. It really helped me to feel more grounded inside and at peace with the stillness that gave me the opportunity to be able to really settle into my self-care, but also um, keep my mind set on the things that I want to do, and also have more time to really sit down and plan and write things down in more detail.
Hadiza, someone asked, they said they're curious about the herbs that, let's see. Oh, Bianca said this. Bianca said, I'm curious about which herbs Hadiza likes to work with, especially to eat. So drop some herb knowledge on us.
Okay, some herbs to work with, especially to eat, is bay leaf. Definitely bay leaf is a strong one. It's antiviral, antibacterial. It also helps to protect on the spiritual realms, to keep negative energies away, and it makes gumbo really good. It makes anything you cook. It's like one of the main ingredients in gumbo. And which brings me to sassafras, which is filet. That's really soothing. That's what, gives gumbo. That's what makes it that great comfort food soup, because it's unnerving. So it's going to relax the nervous system. Ginger is another good one. I love cooking with ginger. I love juicing ginger, and it's another great protection herb. It's another heating herb, which is very important to have during these times, especially during COVID, which is a coronavirus in the same family as the common cold. So it doesn't like heat. So ginger is a good one to cook with and make sure you're consistently taking. Garlic is another one, another antiviral, and just makes food so delicious. And turmeric, anti-inflammatory. Those are a few of the herbs that I love to cook with. Thank you for asking.
I think Iris mentioned that bay leaf is also an abundant herb.
Yes.
So yeah, that's a good, and I'm all about that ginger life. It's real ridiculous. I would like put a little ginger on this, on that. But something that, and then something that Hadiza mentioned that stuck out to me too is this idea of ritualizing cooking. And in this thing that I wrote about, and I'll drop the link for you all to the piece I wrote about basically making self-care a habit. But this idea of ritualizing things, I think, is very important. And one of the good things about making it a habit or ritualizing it is that it becomes a part of your routine, like Hadiza mentioned. And so I think that once that happens, it becomes more important and you're less willing to like let it go for something else. So it's like it's like you have a standing commitment to yourself, a standing date or appointment or whatever with yourself. And because of that, it's like, okay, well, this is the time that I do this. So I'm unwilling to compromise that or to sacrifice that time to do this thing for this other person. We are interconnected folks. So of course, like community is important and we'll talk about all that stuff. But I do think it's very important for us not to lose sight of ourselves in the midst of that and to do things like ritualize the stuff that we like to do. So like cooking, preparing a meal for yourself, the bath, like doing a spiritual bath, like people mentioned in the like bath ritual. I'm all about that. Even just if you just take some time to yourself, like let's say first thing in the morning, you're like, okay, this is my time where I'm just blocking everything out. I'm gonna listen to a few songs. I'm gonna masturbate, whatever you want to do, just to focus on yourself. And then another question that someone mentioned in the chat that I want to bring up to the panelists too is they basically said that they want to be able to support kids in the midst of this and really help to encourage them to have wellness practices too, and to really be able to encourage that and foster that. And I think that's really important. And one of the things that I don't have children, but with the kids in my life, one of the things I do when I talk to them is, for one, really kind of help to enforce and reinforce their agency. So like them not doing like not performative affection and all that kind of stuff. So really them being able to like protect their boundaries, have other people respect their boundaries. And the other thing is too, I try to hone in on whatever they're interested in. So like a couple of my little cousins, I call them my nieces because they're so much younger. They're like little, but they both love like Minnie Mouse. They love dancing. It's like different things they have interest in. So I really try to encourage them like to engage with the things that they are interested in, regardless of anybody else. Like, hey, hey, this person may not want to do this, but it's okay. Like you can just do this because you like it. So starting to use that type of language with them too has been helpful. So I see that they don't seek kind of like the approval or seek to have like, oh, well, this person has to want to do it too. No, just because you like it, that's valid enough, and you can do it, and you can go listen to your music that you like, or you can go dance, or you can go dress up like Minnie Mouse because that's what you like to do, regardless of what anybody else is doing. So I try to encourage that too. And baths, because they love them some bath time. And so I think it could be a really beautiful way to start instituting this idea of kind of like a bath ritual, or just like a, your solo like bath time at the age, because they love splashing in the water and all that kind of stuff. So that has been helpful too.
All right, and then just to add, I don't have kids, but I think Javi already did a good job of pointing that out. But just teaching children how to kind of get into the habits of self-care, even showing them what the appropriate self-care is that you partake in, and maybe inviting them to do it with you, like the nature walks, that just popped in my head, or kids love video games or reading or story time. I think could be really impactful. Kids really love to do things with their parents. So I think if they have an interest in something and they want to talk your ear off, let them, because that's going to be a memory that they can take with them during the COVID and into their adulthood too.
I just wanted to add, because a lot of what you just shared is also helpful for elders who are super at risk for catching COVID, as folks know, and are tending to be isolated. And so thinking of that as well, my grandparents always said, you're once a man and twice a child. So the ways that we nurture children is ways that we can nurture elders as well. And particularly all those things you said were really helpful for folks who have Alzheimer's and dementia. And I think sometimes we think that they're less engaged, and sometimes that might be true, but other times they just want to be engaged in different ways. So for folks out there who have folks at all ages of the age spectrum to consider during COVID, I just wanted to share that those words were helpful for either group.
Okay, and then we also have some questions in the chat regarding questions about how men can practice self-care, because we do have some men in the building. And if any of the panelists would like to chime in, I think that a lot what has been discussed has been really helpful. But I think that self-care isn't totally, like, there are gendered things that when it comes to self-care, but a lot of the stuff like the spiritual baths, men can definitely take spiritual baths, and you may not have long hair. So just dumping that bath water over your head when you're done, having it cool your head down is really impactful. You know, going on nature walks, if you guys are into sports, then partaking in that. I know pre-COVID, a lot of barbershop culture is a part of self-care too, because you can gather. But I even think that maybe making time for Zoom with your old barbershop crew could be really impactful. So you guys can chop it up. You guys can, you know, share like Facebook viewing parties, and just start checking in with each other, because it's not expected for men to do that. You know, to reach out to your friends and ask them, like, what are you going through? We need to have men get out of the habit of hiding their emotions and really putting them at the forefront, because just because you're not showing it doesn't mean it's not hurting. So creating safe spaces where men can talk about their feelings and what they're going through would be super impactful, regarding healthcare wellness when it comes to men. And if any of the other panelists had anything to chime in, but as LaShawn stated, a lot of the self-care isn't gender specific. But I'm gonna go ahead and pass it on to one of my panelists, or my co-host, Javia.
Yeah,
I
I
think I could
definitely
answer
think.
that.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
You're good. Yeah, I think on the point of it being like genderless, I think for men, particularly Black men, like part of that self-care is recognizing that that self-care is genderless. And so, like, what things have you been told in your life as a Black man that you're not allowed to do because Black men can't do those things, even if you actually had a genuine interest in those things? And figuring out, like, you know, actually, like, I'm grown as fuck and like I'm a man regardless because I say I'm a man. So what is it that I'm interested in, that's cool. Like there are Black men that are into things that people wouldn't expect them to be, and there are Black men into things, you know, as trivial as like knitting, like a Black man being told they can't knit, which is a very technical skill and can benefit the community. Like why can't Black men knit something? Like what is wrong with having a needle and knowing how to work a needle through thread? Like that's some ancestral shit right there in itself. And so kind of just reframing actions and decolonizing things, because ultimately I think that would help. I think another point for Black men too is kind of recognizing your relationship with other people, because although Black men are marginalized, no matter what, Black men pretty much will always have a team of women or queer people who are holding them up, kind of regardless of how that Black man treats them. At some point, there's always somebody there to kind of have on a cape. And so, what does that relationship look like with those people, and how can you kind of give that back to them if they're giving that to you? Or how can I pour back into these people pouring into me? Because ultimately, that's going to benefit your self care because they're already doing that part, and so that's going to be like a mutualistic kind of energy exchange that's going on. But I think that's probably the best point that I have on that. I'm not too sure. Like, I can definitely relate to being told I can do things because I was perceived as a Black man. But at the same time, I was raised by Black women and I wasn't really denied things that I was interested in. And so, yeah, those are just kind of the points of my perspectives.
Y'all are really getting to it in this chat. But no, definitely a lot of good points being made. I absolutely agree. One of the things that I'm in a group that's called Black Planters, and so it's just Black folks who garden or grow plants, or just who are, you know, into plants or whatever. And a lot of folks have gotten more into plants since COVID because they have more time at home and they feel like, you know, hey, I have the time and the capacity to care for these things. But that's one of the things that came up, is like this idea of like, well, gardening isn't something that men do. And I'm just like, it's so ridiculous. But there are so many things that we're told that come from just toxic masculinity and patriarchy and all this type of stuff. When if you look at, you know, the history of our folks and all that, like, man, been doing this. Like, this is not something new. This is not, you know, farming, like, you know, some of our closest connections to the earth and to plants and things, I mean, has been farming. And even, you know, that slave labor and all that kind of stuff. It's like being able to be in a place now where we can, of our own, you know, free will, like plant things and grow things with our own hands, and then not be at the, to labor for, you know, this larger system of chattel slavery. I mean, to me, I think that there's a reclamation in that. And that can be a part of self-care that also helps connects us with our ancestors. And so for me, this idea of ancestral connection is very important in my self-care, also because just like there's generational trauma, I feel like there can be generational healing. And so part of my self-care has been really focusing on that and incorporating things to kind of speak to those who came before me and some of the things they went through. So it's kind of like caring for myself, but also caring for those who came before me, who are within me, if that makes sense. It might start to sound kind of hippie-ish or whatever, but that's just where I'm at spiritually. And it's made a big difference. But something I've seen is being in the group is just like being able to see a lot of Black men kind of unpack a lot of the toxic masculinity and be able to really just kind of show themselves without that fear of judgment, without being made to feel less manly or anything. Like if anything, they are hyped up. Like people see, they're like, oh, that's a plant daddy right there. Like, okay, you know what I'm saying? Like he can care for something. He can, you know, so it's celebrated. And so, yeah, I think that ultimately it's not, it doesn't have to be a gendered thing, like self-care in and of itself, but there are considerations that we have to factor in based on this construct of gender and how it has impacted us. So, okay, so I know we have questions in the chat. I do want to see if we have any questions, any other questions specific to self-care before we transition into kind of looking at it, looking at care, like community care and interpersonal care, because I kind of want to shift into that and have the panelists speak to that. So let's see, I'm looking in the chat now. So for the panelists, if you all had any stuff that you wanted to add specifically about self-care before we kind of start broadening it a little bit, then definitely feel free to do so. I'm going to mute myself and check to see what questions we have.
Hey, this is Jan, your chat correspondent, and there was a question a little bit earlier.
Okay.
There's a question about reconciling trauma. So I'm going to read the question. How do you reconcile trauma others have imparted onto you, never wanting them to be near or knowing that they've traumatized themselves and never educating on self-care, and never wanting to be near them with knowing they are traumatized themselves and they're not educated on self-care? So how do you deal with people that have imparted trauma onto you? Mm-hmm. One. Additionally, how do you deal with people who are traumatized themselves? They're not educated on self-care and they continue to traumatize you.
So I want to say something to that real quick before opening up to the panelists, because it's literally very, very incredibly relevant to my life and to some of the work I've been doing in therapy. Part of my self-care is I've increased my therapy, and she be looking out. My therapist is an Indigenous woman. When I say she be holding me down, but so yeah, that's part of the work that I've been doing. So a couple things. So vicarious trauma is a thing. So you being essentially like traumatized from somebody else's trauma. Compassion fatigue is a thing. So you really just kind of being burnt out from being the support, from being the go-to. And that's absolutely a big part of what I'm working through in my life right now. So what I've been doing is, for one, boundaries, having to set boundaries, because you can empathize with someone and understand that, hey, like, I know you're going through this and all that, while also holding space for yourself and being true to yourself. So I used to honestly just take on a lot of stuff, and I would kind of like deal with deal with the impact on me later. Like I would prioritize me being there for that person over me caring for myself. And I had to cut that out, because then I'm like, okay, why do I feel so drained and depleted and irritated? And especially if this is someone I care about, I don't want to become resentful towards them. And that's just, for me, like a path to resentment. So what I've done is, okay, let me establish specific boundaries. Looking at the relationship, I'm like, okay, what are the things that I'm okay to talk about, or what, and what are the things I'm not? So that's what I figured out first. If it's things that I'm just not really comfortable, or I don't feel equipped to take on, or I feel like it's giving me some vicarious trauma, then I just let them know, like, okay, you know, hey, of course I care about you. I'm here for you, but like I also want to be mindful of my own boundaries. And so I want to express like some of these things, which I had just shared like a post about today, but some of these things are better addressed with a professional, better addressed with a spiritual, like a spiritual person, like a spiritual, like healer or a counselor, a therapist, someone who can function specifically in that role for you, so that you can maintain whatever the relationship is. Because if not, then you run the risk of basically you become like a pseudo therapist or a pseudo counselor for that person, and then your whatever your base relationship is, friendship, romantic relationship, whatever, ends up being compromised because of that. So I would just, what I've done is just like set the boundary, like, okay, these are the things I'm okay to kind of work with you with or whatever. And these are the things that I don't feel equipped to deal with. And also having some type of reciprocity in the relationship, because that also contributes to the fatigue. If you're basically, you're the shoulder, you're the rock, you know, you're that go-to person, and you don't have that reciprocity in a relationship, restructuring the relationship in a way where there is some type of reciprocity. So if it's like, okay, well, let's kind of shift it to where we do things where I know there can be a give and take, instead of you come around, you're just dumping and then you're out. And then providing, maybe sharing some resources with them that deal specifically with trauma. And so they can kind of do some of that stuff on their own, because you can care about somebody. That does not mean you have to be a martyr. You do not have to be a martyr. You're not required to do that to prove how much you care about someone. It doesn't make you less caring or less of a good person, to prioritize yourself and to prioritize your wellness and to know like, hey, this is really taking a toll on me. I got to establish some boundaries. So I would say the key word for that is boundaries.
Yes. Thank you, Javia, for answering that. And then Calypso stated that they were talking more so about parents and generational trauma accumulated over the generation and years. So if the panelists want to chime into that, definitely. But personal experience with parents, it's challenging because most of them have this ideology that you are their child and this is what they went through and this is what the person before them went through. So it's normalized and they compartmentalize it to think that it's okay. It's like, well, I turned out fine, or I put, clothes on your back or a roof over your head, when trying to hold them accountable for the trauma that they've imparted on you. So if anyone has any helpful information on that and how to navigate that, please do speak up. Thank you.
I have an answer to that. Well, I have a couple of answers, but I want to answer the specific context of the parents first, and then I'll give a broader context answer after that. In terms of like parental figures, I think ultimately, like there has to be a point where you do stand your ground, and it may look like cutting them off, or them cutting you off, and that's just what it needs to be. In order for you to get the growth that you're wanting to get. I think personally, for me, my relationship with my parents, there's three of them, it's kind of unique because I'm like the younger one and I'm the only queer one. Like I'm the only queer person in my whole entire family. And so standing up for myself and having to have, some kind of boundary at some point is kind of just been part of the journey. And then just getting to the point of me and myself just being like, I really don't care how people feel about me or think about me. Like I'm very transparent, I'm very explicit with how I feel, and however someone reacts to that is just how they react to that. But like wherever you get out of me is me, kind of a thing. And I am the same way in every space. I'm the same way at work, I'm the same way in community, I'm the same way at family things. Like everybody gets the same thing. And so when I'm defending myself, it's the same energy. Like if I feel like I'm being disrespected, I'm gonna say, I don't care how old you are, I don't care what your title is, I don't care how long I've known you. It needs to be a mutual respect thing. And if we're not getting the mutual respect, then there's gonna be a boundary set. Me and my grandma got into a big argument at the end of last year over spirituality because she is very much Christian and I am very much not Christian. And I used to be. And she was mad at me for basically referencing my ancestors, because my aunt was like going through something and we were like in a group chat and everyone was kind of giving their like like blessings and whatnot. And I was like very specific. I'm like, oh yeah, I'll like, talk to my ancestors for your healing and stuff like that. And she kind of was just like attacking me for it and being like, wasn't like God enough, or it's only gonna work if I ask God and like all this kind of stuff. And I'm just like, no, like what the fuck is your problem? Like I'm sitting here just trying to give my own version of blessings. Like don't sit here and try to invalidate it when your religion is literally like what the white man used to enslave our people. Like don't think that your religion is perfect. And I've never come for your religion, but since you're coming for me, I'm gonna go off on Christianity. And so I went off. And this is a family group chat. So everybody in the family is seeing this. And I was just like, it is what it is. And like we're not moving past this until I get an apology. And she's not someone who typically apologizes. And so that was my boundary with her. Like I love you immensely and she loves me immensely, but like if you can't get to a point of apologizing and admitting that you were wrong in this instance, then there's nothing for me to talk about. And she was trying to contact me and stuff after that argument happened, and I was just giving her the silent treatment. And so it took about like a month and a half to 2 months for her to kind of come around and, have a huge shift into being like, okay, like I was wrong, like I understand what you're saying now. This is what I was trying to say. This is what it meant to me, and now I understand what this means to you. And sometimes it takes having to be that, and that doesn't mean that you're being a mean person. It doesn't mean that you're being disrespectful. It just means that you're being yourself. I'm being like, when they get mad at me for doing that, I'm just like, I'm being who you raised me to be. You raised me to be a person who stands up for my beliefs. We all are like this. We all are very true to what we believe. That's why we're arguing, because you're true to what you believe in and I'm true to what I believe in. And we're just going to butt heads, and that's just what it is. And we're very, like, all my family, we're all like that. Like, we're very straightforward. We're very explicit in the way that we communicate. And a lot of people aren't like that. And so when I'm out communicating with other people, it comes off weird because they think that I'm just being aggressive or whatever. But I'm like, nah, I don't like being confused. Like the way that we speak and the way that we navigate and continue to stay strong even when we argue is that, we're true. And so if you can't have a relationship where you can be true to each other, then maybe it's not worth having, regardless of what they are to you. And as far as like parents and family. And then the second part that I want to talk about, that Javia was kind of hitting on too, is I'm in the same boat. And like this is my therapist was clocking me for yesterday. Like my therapy session was basically like, how am I having self-care and like my lack of own self-care, because I am kind of always in a martyr position and being who I am to community, being who I am to my family, being who I am with chosen family, being who I am in my relationship. I'm just often the person who's expending a lot of emotional labor and having the skill to, and not limiting myself and like how much I'm giving out. And so that's always been kind of work in progress, because sometimes I'll like set the boundary and be aware, and then all of a sudden it's like, how did I get here? And I'm encumbered with all of this stuff and helping all these people. And I never have an issue actually helping people. That's not the problem. The problem is not taking care of myself whilst doing it, and also lack of reciprocity, like Javi was saying. And my therapist yesterday also kind of pointed out the lens that I had, and that often people who kind of experience compassion fatigue have, is that we have this lens of pain instead of this lens of resiliency. And because we have this lens of pain, like my thought process is like, my friend or someone that I know is going through something, I have the resources and know-how to help them get through it. So I'm going to offer that to them, and I'm going to jump in and save them and, be in the rescue, even if that's not necessarily like what I'm trying to do. I just want to help someone. Like I just do it. Like if I can do it, if I see it, I'm not going to just scroll past something if I have the resource or whatever. And she illuminated to me kind of like, that's fine, but at the same time, there comes to be a point where it's too much and you're actually not helping that person either. Like you're hurting both of you. You're hurting yourself and you're hurting the person. You're hurting yourself because you're not taking care of yourself and your boundaries. You're hurting that person because you're viewing them through a lens of pain, which means that you're not viewing them as being capable enough to figure it out themselves. And because you're helping them so much, they're never going to figure it out themselves. And you have to look at people instead of like, this person's going through so much, like, oh my God, I can't believe this is happening, and like tacking it on and spiraling onto what's happening. Instead, acknowledging what's happening to them, being like, wow, like this person has gone through so much and here they are still standing, and like they're going to be able to make it through. And you can offer a little bit of help and like be very intentional with what you're offering. Like, this is what I can do for you, like X thing, and that's it. and kind of move on, because people do and will have to be resilient in their own lives, and they can't depend on you all the time, and they're never going to learn to move past that. And it's going to become this thing that is called a tacit promise that I learned a long time ago in my very first college philosophy class. And what a tacit promise is essentially a pattern that happens. And so if you offer, for example, to pay for a friend's food every time y'all go out because they are a broke friend or don't have the resources or whatever, and the one time y'all are out and you don't pay for them, and now they're upset, and you're wondering why they're upset at you, it actually is your fault. It's not their fault. The reason why it's your fault is because you've created this implication and this tacit promise, this passive promise, that you were going to cover them every single time because you were doing that, and it happened over and over and over again. So there wasn't anything that needed to be said. And because of that, you failed to set that boundary. And so that is something that a lot of us tend to do. And you have to be able to name the boundary and name what's happening, or have a timeline to kind of the help that you're offering people, because there needs to be a timeline, especially if people aren't helping you, because then at the end of the day, you're pouring your empty cup into all these other people's cup. They're going to be full, but they're not going to be able to pour back into you. They're just going to be fine or taking from other people. And here you are kind of just being a parasite to yourself, and people being a parasite to you. And the last point too is kind of just like, don't connect to violence so much. Because we were talking about kind of my reaction to the death of Chadwick Boseman recently over this weekend. And my therapist told me, like, what was my first thought when I first saw it? And I told her my first thought was like, oh my God, like, this is awful. Like, the Black community, like, is taking so many L's. Like, we just can't get a break. And she was like, why is that like the first thing that you jumped into? And she was like, well, what was your next thought? And I told her kind of like my thought process, and she was like, see, like, you tacked so many things onto this thing that was already heavy that didn't need to be tacked on, and the Black community has a habit of doing that. We already know that it's sad that he passed away. We already know all these things. Like, we could acknowledge that, you know what, he passed away, and like, it is what it is, and reframe it into like, now he's become an ancestor, or what he did while he was alive has influenced the Black community, and focus on that instead of being like, oh no, he had cancer, oh no, we lost another hero, oh no, all the kids are devastated, oh no, like, all these things, because it doesn't actually help us or move us forward. It actually just adds more weight onto our plate that's already added, and it's not helpful for anyone. But that was the last thing that I had to add for those questions.
I'm wondering if our therapists like just be talking or something. It's so real. Listen, my therapist be dragging me. Whew. She be dragging me. And one of the things that you spoke to about kind of taking care of people's problems. So the thing you mentioned about the promise, can you put that in the chat, that phrase? Because yeah, but the other piece of that is like, yes, looking at it through a lens of pain instead of resiliency, which is one of the things that my therapist mentioned. And the other piece was also, we're looking at it, part of that is ego. Part of that is feeling like, number one, if I don't do it, who's going to do it? Which is absolutely a huge part of my issues. And when I talk about not being a martyr, like, please believe this is from my personal experience. Like, I'm not saying some stuff, just be like, yeah, don't do that. Cause that's what I was doing. Y'all, like, I'm in recovery. I'm in recovery from these things. And so that's part of it. Part of it is like this idea that if I don't do it, then it won't get done. But that also places a lot of importance on yourself in this other person's story. Ultimately, it is their thing to work through. And so if you put the onus on yourself to be like, I have to be the problem solver, I have to be the person to come up with the solution. When you're used to functioning in that role, it's easy to continue that pattern. And that's, especially with Black folks, especially with Black mages, like, that's what we do. Like, that's, sometimes we're forced in those situations. And sometimes I think just because we've been indoctrinated that way is what I mean. Like, it's not like we were just born like, I'm gonna take on all the problems, but it's like, we watch the people who raise us and stuff, we see how they handle stuff. And then we end up doing that too. And part of that is a part of that generational legacy of, we shoulder all the things, right? So part of that is kind of separating ourselves from that. We don't have to carry everything. Everything ain't for us to carry. We all have our own, I say context, but we all have our own stuff that we're like dealing with and working with. And I can't be like, okay, so now I got to carry, you know, Bianca stuff and Iris stuff and Hadi, like, no, like that person is fully capable of kind of processing through their stuff, and we can be a support. Being a support does not mean it's your responsibility to be a facilitator, to be a carrier, to be a problem solver, to be the person who is like, who comes up with a solution. And so part of that is this kind of thought process of martyrdom. It's like what we're playing out, because then you end up sacrificing yourself sacrificing yourself for the sake of essentially saving someone, when that it's not something that we can do. And that does center ego. Then too, it also shifts the relationship to one where you develop a pseudo parent-child relationship with someone. You feel like, so parents' responsibility are to parent their kids. So you're supposed to provide guidance. You're supposed to help them and stuff like that. When you develop that in a relationship that's different, then you're looking like, this person can't do this without me. This person can't accomplish this without me. This person doesn't have so it's like it's like you're looking at them to an extent as either they're emotionally not as mature as you, or intellectual, like there's some ego there that we have to, like, when we look at stuff, we unpack, like, I mean, I believe in shadow work and stuff like that too. So we got to look at the flip side of that. Like, yes, like I'm being a nice person, I'm helpful, but also, are you basically like low key putting this person down, like, oh, well, they can't handle it by themselves, so I got to come through. I got to be the person to come. So that's ego. Like that's ego, to be like, I got to come to the rescue because they can't do it. So we have to separate ourselves from that too. So we got to separate ourselves from the self-sacrificial behavior of like, my needs don't matter, but also separate some from the ego and just find a balance of like, I can be a support because we are interconnected, and we basically already shifted into the next little part. So that's cool. We are interconnected, but I also have to like prioritize myself without amplifying like my importance in somebody else's story. Like, I'm part of the support, but I'm not the narrator of their story. I'm not, the person who's responsible for turning the page. Is not kind of like, no, like we all got our own stuff, going on. So I think that is definitely important. So I don't have to transition us to that, because we already actually spoke to like boundaries and all that kind of stuff. But what I want to ask the panelists in the course of like just kind of making sure that you're focusing more on your wellness, because it is an ongoing process. Like, I definitely don't profess to be like, oh, I got it all figured out. I absolutely do not. And honestly, some of the stuff that I'm sharing with that, like, I'm literally in process right now today of working on this stuff. Like, some of this stuff was like my most recent therapy session. Like, it's real. So it's definitely not like I'm so enlightened and I'm just there. Like, no, I'm like trying to grind it out and like really work through my stuff for real, because I want to be able to free myself up to be happy, is ultimately what it is. So in this process for each of you, like, have you had any pushback? Like, have you had any pushback from folks? Like, if you assert, your boundaries, like, have folks been like, had an issue with it? Have you seen relationships change for better or for worse? Like, what has that been like? Just even the process of kind of like trying to assert some boundaries, and people being like, well, that ain't how usually, that ain't how we used to operating. So now you don't want to pay for my food? Like, what's up with that?
Any of our panelists want to add in?
Yeah, I'll add. So it's setting boundaries and having folks push back from those boundaries. That has definitely been a case with me, and especially surrounding family, going back to parents and siblings, because people closest to you see your vulnerabilities, and so sometimes they hold you in the light that they see you, or in that space, even when you try to change. So I've definitely had pushback, and have had to really take space and really go within to check my capacity and where I'm at. And I've lost, you know, and I don't like to say it is lost, because I don't really create fixed doors. And I hope, especially those that I'm close to, I hope that they are able to find that peace within themselves to where they can, you know, ultimately respect my boundaries. But it has definitely led to having to create space and distance between me and those that I love. But in that time, like Ayotunde said, like in the situation with their mother, and having to, you know, having there be sometimes 1 month or 2 months, but it gives, you know, people that space to kind of grow within themselves, and then, you know, kind of realize that they do value you. And that's a hope. That's a hope for me.
When it comes to like pushback, like people who know me probably already know, but like I'm pretty aggressive when it comes to like setting my boundaries. Like I'm a really friendly and honestly somewhat shy person, but I have a very strong presence. And I am, you know, pretty known relatively when it comes to the community, and so that has its influence. But really, when it comes down to it, I could say that I'm a laid back person, but the moment that I'm disrespected, that completely changes. Like, I'm gonna be cool with you as long as you're cool with me. But once you disrespect me, then I'm not gonna be cool with you, because I don't pretend. I don't pretend to like anyone. I don't pretend to have a certain viewpoint. Like, I've built myself up before. Like, I have a lot of support now, and that's great, and I'm super appreciative. But I didn't always have that, and I was like this before that. And I have a very clear understanding, and I've wrote about this on my Instagram before. Like, I have a great partner, I have a great chosen family, I have a great relationship with my blood family. I don't need anyone else. So I don't really care if you actually like me or not. I don't really care if you find me attractive or not. I don't really care if you support me or not, because when you leave or you stop supporting me, there's always going to be at least three more people who are going to come into my space. And that's just how it's been in my life. And that's not to say that I'm overconfident or cocky, but it's to say that I'm aware of the shifts. And if you can't respect the boundary that I'm setting, then that's okay. But you can get the fuck out of my space. So I'm going to let you know to get the fuck out of my space, or I'm going to move you. And it can go either way. But what I'm not going to do is sit here and play games when life is limited and I could die tomorrow. And so that's kind of how I move. I have a presence that demands respect from everyone. In the moment that I feel that I'm not getting that respect, I snap. Now, is it always equivalent to what the person is doing to me?
Period. I just had to say that.
Yes. Is my reaction always equivalent to what they're doing? Perhaps not. But do I care? Oftentimes, no. Because I'm setting my boundary, and I was very clear. It's not my fault if you can't be clear about yours, but I was clear about mine. No one's gonna navigate with me in confusion unless it's self-imposed. Like, I'm very clear about how I feel and how I want to move and how I want you to treat me. And if it's unclear, then I'm very open to just being like, this is what it is if you ask. So there isn't any excuse to not be following my boundaries, or being in my space if you want to be in my space. And it's just simple as that. And you should feel righteous in saying that and letting people know about that. Being mean or rude or nice to anybody, it's just about having the respect of the person that you're supposed to be. Because the moment that you don't let someone do it, it's going to become a pattern of you just kind of succumbing to how people are treating you. And perhaps there are like safety reasons why you can't always be, you know, as like a I don't know, like a rock with your foundation, but there are other ways that you still can kind of reclaim your respect. So I also understand that I have privilege being someone that is AMAB, being someone that is 6'4". Most people aren't going to try me, not even straight men. Like, they don't even bother. I could be out in a skirt and makeup and they'll just look at me. They won't really say anything because they don't want to fight, because they're going to, like, I'm an intimidating person just off of my body. And that's a privilege that I have. And so it's kind of like working with what you got and still having that voice and just standing your ground for me.
I love that. In the chat, folks are asking when you and Javi are going to have a boundary workshop, and I would love to attend too.
I'm with it. Yes, let me tell you, I'm with it. I'm all about reclaiming my time.
Yes,
Okay.
I had one earlier this year with Aya Black Healing Radical Collective. There's some members actually in here. Calypso and Onethia and Haley are part of Aya as well. So that could be an upcoming collaboration, actually. So let's pin that.
Hey y'all, what's
But
up?
I'm super big on boundaries. Like, people know I'm the boundary person, because I don't play. Like, it doesn't matter to me. And I think sometimes people are afraid of that pushback. They're afraid of someone coming for them for asserting a boundary, or afraid to be made out to be an abuser even. Because that's something else that we can talk about, is being a Black person and having the gall, the audacity to have a boundary and to assert it towards someone. Because the moment that you do that, all of a sudden you're all these labels,
Right.
and all these hateful things, when really you're just asserting a boundary. And I encountered this as someone that is non-binary and AMAT, because I'm queer and femme in these spaces and cute and it's all fun and family or whatever. But the moment that I'm checking someone that is a woman or a trans woman or femme identified, all of a sudden I become a man and I'm aggressive and like all these things. But just a moment ago, we were on the same level.
Right.
And so it's like, what does that mean when we're having mutual respect and we're not weaponizing our identity versus the reality of what's happening, and being able to sit in that? Because you can call me misogynist all you want, but my circle and who I was raised by is going to tell you that that's not going to be accurate. That's not going to work for you, because if you knew anything about me, you would know first and foremost, I was raised by 3 Black women. So I wasn't socialized like Black men were. I was socialized to be misogynistic and misogynoir and all those things. So you can't place that against me. And so those are things that I've had to overcome myself, is being like, what can I say? What can I say? What can I not say? How can I navigate? How can I move in a way that's me not being abused, because I'm afraid to assert my own boundary when I know this is wrong, but I feel like I'm trapped and I can't say something. You can always say something, and someone's always going to have a problem with what you're saying, whether it's the truth or not. So just move like that. Like, if you know it's true, then it's true to you. And if you're wrong and you find out that you're wrong in retrospect, then own it. And that's the best you can do.
But you know where part of that comes from? Because I'm all about that boundary life. And I've been talking to people about this idea of being nice, versus being kind. And how, for one, niceness is not, no one is entitled to niceness. It's not mandatory. I'm not obligated to be nice to you. And ultimately, a lot of that stuff comes from the byproducts of white supremacy. Basically, as Black folks, we're supposed to be infinitely accessible. So we're supposed to be infinitely available to provide labor, and we better smile while we're doing it. And so that has also been internalized amongst ourselves, because that's how that's how this system works. It's been ingrained, we've been indoctrinated into it, and we perpetuate it. And so that's part of it. It's like, how dare you not be accessible to me? How dare you not be available to provide this mental, physical, emotional, spiritual labor? How dare you? Like, so then it gets attached to this idea of being nice. You're not being nice because you're not doing this thing. But ultimately, it's like, it's not you asserting a boundary does not mean you're not a nice person. But I also think we have to kind of step back some from being so worried about being a nice person. I can be kind. I can be loving. There's so many other, so many things we can be, but I'm never obligated to be nice. I don't have to be nice to you. That doesn't mean I have to be a bitch. Doesn't mean I have to be mean. It's not like if I'm not nice, then I'm mean, but I can just exist and I can just be myself and assert my boundaries however I need to assert them. As long as I'm not, doing something that's hurting you or none of that kind of stuff. I'm not required to be nice. And so if I relieve myself from that thought that I got to be nice, then it makes me not acquiesce to so many things that I know I really don't want to do for real, but I'm doing it for the sake of being nice. When I separated myself from that idea, it has been a game changer for me, because now I'm not beholden to that. I don't feel like, oh, if I don't do this, they're not going to think I'm nice, or like I'm not caught up in what that's going to mean for how this person sees me. If you see me negatively for me asserting my boundaries, then that's on you. And then we probably don't need to for real be in community like that. Anyway, if that's how you feel about me, if you feel like, oh, well, Javi asserted a boundary. She's a bitch, she's this, she's that. I have absolutely been viewed that way. Like, oh, I'm so aggressive. I'm so assertive. I'm the quintessential angry Black woman. And I used to fight against that and like try to be like, oh, I'm nice. I'm so whatever. And now honestly, like if that's what I got to be, I'll be that. You see me as angry Black woman, then fine. I'm gonna be that. Period. It just is what it is, because I'm not going to, just for you to not see me that way, I'm not about to be like, let me just like totally be a martyr or be all nice when I really am not feeling this and go against my own boundaries just so you can be like, oh yeah, she's nice. What you really mean is I'm accommodating. What you really mean is like, I'm accessible to you and I'm doing the labor that you want me to do. That's what you mean by nice. And I'm just not interested in that anymore. So, but I feel like that's where a lot of that comes from, is like us perpetuating some of that stuff that's been placed on us in this system that we live in. Is like, that person nice, a lot of times that's what people mean, is that either sometimes they mean they're kind. Like one of the things when I talk about Bianca, I say, oh, Bianca's one of the, well, I stopped saying nice. I say one of the kindest people that I know, because I don't mean nice like, yeah, she just gonna do whatever. I mean nice like they are kind, like it's more of a spiritual thing, like just a genuinely kind, like their energy, whatever. So I started changing the language that I use, because there are some things that come with that idea. And so I think that's what it is. People think that you have to be accessible and you got to do this labor, and I ain't with it. Like I used to be with it, but yeah, I'm just like, nah. So if that mean I'm not nice, then that's just fine.
Oh, thank you, Javia. I also wanted to respond to this question, because I think of boundaries as commitments to myself, and not always as a consequence to others. So it's not necessarily my weapon, but it's my balm. It's like my soothing element. And I think of triggers as not always connected to the current moment that we're in. So kind of connected to the previous question, where someone is like, that, asserting their own boundary, right? Like, I actually do demand that you are in service to me. I actually am asserting the commitment that I have to myself, which is others support me and I don't have responsibility over my own actions or emotions. That is their boundary and their commitment to themselves. And my own commitment feels triggered in this moment because it's been triggered before. And so I think of triggers as like, kind of like your body, your mind souping up, like, oh, we about to fight again? I already know. Come on, what are we doing? And the beauty of that, when you realize that the trigger is actually like your body souping up, your anxiety being like, what do you need? Do you need a little panic stomach? Do you need like a fluttering of the chest? Do you need your blood going? Do you need your endorphins? What do you need? We're trying to figure this out together. Is that you can be like, I've got this. This actually isn't a threat to me. I'm actually unfazed. I've done this before. I've been there. You're not going to ruin my day. I'm actually going to leave. And so thinking of triggers as like not this power that someone has over you in that moment, but actually the power that you have over your body. It's actually your body trying to figure out what you need. And you get to then tell your body that I actually don't need these triggers right now. I don't need these endorphins. I don't need to feel excited or mad or upset. I just need to remove myself from the situation. I just need to close this chapter of my life. Like, allow yourself to be in conversation with your body. And then kind of connected to like boundary setting with people, I think it's important to think about boundary setting with work, because capitalism has us thinking that our positive energy is limited, and that if we're going to have it limited, it should be prioritized to make money. So we end up giving the best versions of ourselves to our employer, to the person, the angry customer. We know how to be like really mindful then. We know to be like, oh, I want to say something really hard, but I'm not going to say it because you're a customer. And I'm like, I don't owe that customer more respect than I do a family member, right? And so like, what are the ways that we say that we are going to enforce these boundaries because you're not going to fuck with us, but like the people we end up being really like with are the people that, in an ideal world, if I weren't struggling with capitalism, I would actually have the compassion and the mental space to be more compassionate with you. And I spend so much time giving the best version, the person who thinks before they speak, the person who walks away before sending that like terrible email, the person who like drinks a cup of coffee so I'm like actually able to hear what you have to say. All those things I do so that I can survive a work day. If I didn't rely on and give so much of my time and energy and reverence to capitalism, I might have those resources to handle those conversations better. So again, it's going back to like, when people come at you, it is definitely their shit. That is so true. And it's like, there's a lot at my disposal. How am I using my time? Am I am I giving so much of my energy to work in this 9 to 5 that I feel so depleted that I actually have to set this boundary right now because I can't even look at you in the face? Because is that really that moment, or is that capitalism that has like deteriorated our relationship, that none of us have the spoons to have a healthy conversation? So just wanted to name that, because I also struggle with having conversations with my family, especially, and I wonder what other panelists have to say, and folks in the chat too, about we do all this movement work, we do all this practice, this spiritual practice, all this healing work, and I feel like I end up giving it to my clients, I end up giving it to the organizations that I work with. But then when my mom calls me up, I'm like suddenly triggered and suddenly have this horrible argument, and there's no meditation, there's no candle, none of that's there. And then we just fight. And I'm like, I don't want to give, like, the reason I do this work is for me and mine. Like, I love community, I love people, I love the world. But if at the end of the day, my home is in shambles because I can't actually have the spoons to bring that light into my people's life, then it feels for naught. And so I have to always reimagine, like, how am I extending my energy? Who has the priority? Who am I prioritizing the best versions of myself to? And if I'm shifting, then it might not be that person having the audacity to ask me for money. That might not be what's actually triggering me. And so there might not be a reason to pop off on them because they asked me for 20 bucks again. The issue might be we're trapped in capitalism. I'm stressed, you're stressed, and we just gave all of our energy at our 9 to 5s, and you just happen to be asking me after I paid a ridiculous light bill, or after I paid for water that ain't clean anyway, and now I'm mad at you. So just being in control of where our emotions are and who is triggering what, and what powers we have at our disposal when we are triggered and when we need to set boundaries, feels important too, to hold that idea of boundary setting and compassion, because so much is within our disposal to make agreements with the people around us.
Bianca, what you just mentioned reminds me of a conversation between Nikki Giovanni and James Baldwin. And there's like a small clip of it that has circulated, social media multiple times. But in this in this clip, Nikki Giovanni is saying, she's basically like, you go out into the world and you're like, you're at work, you're nice, and you're smiling, and you're giving them, it's basically speaking to what you said about you're giving them the best of you. And then when you get home, I get, what's left. I get the attitude and I get the mean face. And of course, this is not exactly her words because, Nikki is more eloquent, but that was the concept of like, okay, you get home, why don't I get the niceness? Why can't I get the smiles? Basically. And if you're saying that's a lie or a facade, then like basically what she said, she was like, well, lie to me. Basically, like, I don't want to be the person who I just get the negative. And when I say that, like me seeing it hit so hard, I'm like, that's so real. And in doing this work, as I've been doing my work on myself and looking at like my relationship, I don't want that to be the story, like in my marriage. I don't want for, my wife as a byproduct of me doing this work to just get the remnants of me. Like, I'm in partnership with you. I'm in life partnership with you, and we have essentially a covenant with one another. Like, I don't want for you to get, the least of me. And once I really started looking at that, I started making shifts when it comes to work. So now it's like, when I think about clocking in and clocking out, it's also a mental thing. And that means that there's a certain amount of energy and stuff that's going to happen at this place and for this, but it's not going to trump what my loved ones get. It's not going to trump what my wife is. And that wasn't always the case. And it wasn't an intentional thing, but that is because, like you mentioned, like of labor and capitalism being so prioritized. And we're taught for that to be our priority. Like, we spend so much time at work or commuting to and from work. Like, we're taught that, oh, what's your dream job? Like, okay, do I dream of labor? No. Like, that type of stuff. It's like, we're trained to like, you enjoy your job, your work is your family, and all this type of stuff that they do. When ultimately my family is my family, my loved ones, my community, and also they're part of my community. And so I do want to have something for them. But yeah, it just made me think of that conversation, and really doing the work to make that separation. And it has made a difference. It's made a difference in my relationships. It's made a difference in my marriage, to be more mindful and deliberate. Like, I just don't do it. I'm like, y'all, you don't get that much of me. Like, I have my cap and I'm just like, that's all I got for you. Like, this is a job. ultimately. And I can enjoy what I do, but ultimately that's not the entirety of my life.
Yes, I just want to add one more thing because it feels connected to the conversations around therapy earlier and roles. Because so often folks feel like, oh, I'm coming home and I'm just being real with you. You know, this is me keeping it 100. This is me being vulnerable, unpacking, giving you the real. I'm like, but I'm not your therapist. So if we're going down a spiral, like I would rather you have actual resources because I've also just come from a long day. I've also have my own things. And I would rather us use this time, like if we're in a bad space or need a lot of support, to go figure that out and then see how we can come together. Because then the few times that we do have together, we then have to be each other's therapists. And that can also be really draining and doesn't really get us to the fulfilling. Like it's a false sense of intimacy where we feel like
it's kind of like trauma bonding, basically. Yeah, you end up trauma bonding and then you don't have the true like intimacy that you need to be able to rest with one another. And it's not fair. You know, it's not fair to one another that it's like, okay, well now we just come like, because then it ends up deteriorating the relationship. And then you can have the compassion fatigue. I mean, that's something that a while ago, like that my wife expressed to me. And when I was, you know, she was just like, you know, I have some compassion fatigue. She didn't say those words, but based on what she expressed, you know, figuring out it was compassion fatigue. And I've, you know, felt the same way. So I'm like, okay, that has to be something different. So we do have therapists, like let's utilize those resources. And so that when our time together can be time spent having quality time, not, you know, pseudo therapeutic time where we're dumping and we're venting and all kinds of stuff, because that's not fair. And that can destroy a relationship because then that's just what it becomes. And so I would much rather us spend our time together, being able to do things we enjoy. You know, let's go for a walk. Let's watch this. So we have a lot more since those boundaries, you know, because that's still a boundary setting thing. Since we've established those boundaries around our self-work and our jobs and all kinds of stuff, our time together is more quality time. So we can Netflix and chill. We can have sex. We can do whatever we want to do to have actual intimacy and not just swapping trauma, you know, basically.
Okay. I wanted to acknowledge the ancestors real quick, and bring in another tool that we can also use sometimes when it's hard to find that grounded space or that space to stand up. Channeling in the ancestors is very helpful, and that can be you know, depending on whatever religion that you're in or tradition, and it can even be people that you know, or, you know, your blood ancestors that passed away, or Harriet Tubman. One example is Oya, and Oya brings thunder and brings change, or Scorpio, you know, like we can channel in these ancestors, and traditionally we would carry charms around us that would help us to remind us of that spirit or that energy that comes with it. For instance, if you need help with holding a boundary, you know, you can sit or put a rock in your hand, or some black tourmaline, a black crystal, and allow yourself to kind of ground in. Or if you need you know, if you need more fire to be able to speak what's on your mind, you know, and stand up for yourself, then you can, you know, channel in that fire, or channel in Ogun, the warrior spirit, you know, and or, you know, Harriet Tubman, you know, when she was like, I'm not gonna take no shit, you know, and change the situation. So this can be done, you know, with just finding who and what energy represents that for you, and then being able to channel that spirit or that energy, or that person to help you, to assist you with, you know, whatever you need in that time, in that moment.
I love that you mentioned Oya, because that's
I'm
my
just snapping for
person.
Hadiza.
Yes, Oya is my person. I actually have specific relationship to her that I kind of tacitly mentioned earlier at the beginning of the session. I got a divination done when I did my ancestry years ago to find out kind of where I was connected to, and Oya kind of who has been with me as I've been like guided throughout the journey, and who I feel has ultimately been with me since I was young. And I'm only now starting to, you know, develop and foster that relationship. So that was super cool to hear you mention her.
I do want to be respectful of time. So yes, definitely. I second, third, all that stuff because that has been a huge thing for me in terms of connecting with my ancestors. And honestly, it took the passing of my grandmother, who was essentially like my other parent, to really be a game changer for me and really kind of like spark my interest in more ancestral work, more working with like crystals and rituals. And like it just was something because I was, it took, I guess, just a certain level of grief where I was so distraught, or I just had so much despair that I was just like, I gotta find something. Like I just really felt in a place like where I was just like, I gotta figure out what to do because this, I can't, just keep rocking like this. But I do want to be respectful of time. So what I want to do is our chat correspondent, Jan. Are there questions that we have not addressed in some type of way in our conversation? If so, I do want to make space for those and then allow the panelists to plug whatever they need to plug so that y'all can, keep up with everybody, and also circle back to Radiating Love because we got some goodies from Radiating Love. So I want to make sure to address all that.
We love the goodies. Yeah. Thank you, Radiating Love, for that. This is Jan, your chat correspondent. I haven't received any direct questions. I don't think that I've missed anything, but there is a consensus around some workshops around herbal uses. There's a consensus around a workshop and information around boundaries. There's a consensus around workshops and information around unpacking the Mani complex. That the boundaries of bombs was really impactful to me. So unless I miss anything, right now is your chance to post it in the chat or send it to me directly, a question that you want the panel to answer. We're also, it looks like there is an interest in addressing toxic masculinity as well. So before we leave today, if you have a question, hit us up.
Yeah, I definitely love that idea of boundaries as balm and not weapons, and boundaries as commitment. I already kind of like look at boundaries as like commitments to myself. And so definitely it's nothing against anyone else. It's just what I need to do for myself. But something about the language of like balm, I'm just like, I'm here for all of that. So I had to write it down. I'm like in the chat too, like, yeah, type, because I'm like, yeah, I need that. Okay, so yeah, I'm checking to see if we have any questions. In the meantime, I want to thank all of you for being involved. It has been really awesome to collaborate with Iris and to collaborate with BWU in doing this. I had Iris on my podcast a while ago, actually. This was quite some time ago. And since then, I've been interested in doing some type of collaboration. We had talked about it, and I wanted to actually do it in person. We're both in California, but still not close because California is huge, but I was going to fly up there, and I really wanted to do something like this live with them. But since that didn't work, I didn't want for us to not collaborate just because of COVID, because COVID, you don't run everything. So yeah, I'm glad we got a chance to do this. So yeah. Y'all got stuff to plug? What's up? Tell folks where they can find you. And we also have posted on social media. So y'all can go to BWU social media or Black Radical Queer social media, and you will find the information for the panelists as well. Please support them, follow everybody, see what they got going on. And I've been like looking at everybody's social media, the folks who I didn't know, so I can kind of get to know them. And now I'm just like, I'm all for, I feel like I'm a fan because I'm just like, wait, okay, I see what you're doing. So yeah. Y'all got stuff you need to plug or anything?
I guess I'll take this opportunity to go. So, hi everyone, my name is LaShawn. I am the owner and creator of Radiating Love. Radiating Love is a whole life care movement, and my goal with starting this business was to share natural and ancestral healing with the community. Oftentimes we focus on physical healing, but my brand incorporates the mind, body, and spirit, because all three must be working in harmony to allow us to function at our highest self. All of the products are made with organic ingredients and created with pure intentions and love. I want my people to know that we have the power innately to heal and cleanse ourselves with herbs and plants and oils from the land, despite what colonialism has taught us. So some of the products that are going to be included in the giveaway is a cramp tea, a yoni steam detox. I have another tea for uplifting and boosting moods, as well as a spiritual bath kit. I would love to highlight some of the ingredients in each of the products. So I will just go through that really quickly. So in the cramp tea, I've got cramp bark, which is also known as devil's shoestring, and as the name suggests, it helps relax muscles to relieve bloating. Red raspberry leaf is included as well, and it's rich in vitamins and minerals like iron. It's also known as the woman's herb, and it contains plant compounds that help tone and tighten the muscles in the pelvic area, which ultimately helps reduce it cramping. Peppermint is in there as well, and I grew up in a Jamaican household, so tea is life. So it wasn't until I got older and I started thinking about herbs and using them that I realized that the benefits of peppermint and peppermint leaves. The menthol and the mint tea leaves relax the spasms in the uterine muscles that cause cramping, and it also calms nausea and diarrhea, which accompanies the whole Menzies situation. And so the main reason why I wanted to create the next product was to help with my ever-growing uterine fibroids. Fibroids are non-cancerous tumors that develop within the muscle tissues of the uterus. As some of you may know, Black AFABs are 2 to 3 times more likely to suffer from that than whites. So some recommendations from my doctors were to have surgery to remove the uterus completely and the tumors, and none of that sounded appealing to me. So I've been seeking out more natural alternatives. So in the yoni steam, we have red raspberry leaf as well. We also have calendula, which is fantastic for the skin. It helps to soothe and aids in the healing of scar tissue, vaginal tears, or hemorrhoids, and it also fights yeast. We have also got motherwort, which is commonly known for reproductive health, and specifically by reducing tension and stress by the straightening and relaxing of the muscles in the uterus. And it also helps with the fibroids, and it's just a great toner for the uterine system. And so I just wanted to kind of take the time in 2020 to just switch gears and focus a little less about some of the medicinal benefits and work on spiritual benefits. So I've created a few new products to really focus on healing in totality. And so I just wanted to share some of those for this giveaway. So my uplifting tea is a special combination of calming herbs and powders that ease tension and help maintain a balanced mental and emotional state. Ashwagandha powder is an adaptogen, which is a natural substance that helps the body adapt to stress and helps to increase serotonin levels in your body, giving a positive attitude that helps ease stress, anxiety, and tension. St. Johnson's wort is also in there, which has been widely used as a remedy for depression and other mental health issues. It works to boost mood and other symptoms of depression like loss of appetite, lethargy, and insomnia. We've also got Damiana root powder, which is stimulating and has restorative properties that aids in boosting and maintaining mental and physical stamina. It helps with depressive episodes, anxiety, and nervousness. And it was actually one of the first herbs that I've heard to incorporate in weed to help elevate the experience. And as a bonus, it is also an aphrodisiac. And finally, I've also got some oat straw in there, which helps depression and anxiety, but also nourishes the pancreas, liver, and adrenal glands. And disruptions in the adrenal glands can cause changes in mood, irritability, and depression. And one of the final products in there is going to be a spiritual bath with a spiritual bath kit. I worked with a really great friend to come up with this product, and I'm so excited to share that. We've got some rose petals in there, which are great for relaxing and uplifting and softening skin. Chamomile is known as a herb of purification and protection, and it helps relax your mind, clear negative energy as well for southern area. And its association with the sun for prosperity will leave you glowing. Calendula is also in there as well. It's a great healing herb. It's most recently become one of my favorites. It helps ward off negative energies and evil energies and helps promote love. And finally, we've got some rosemary as well in the spiritual bath, because it's a protective herb, and it aids with the cleansing and purification of the spirit. And you've got to think of it as a way to energize and invigorate yourself. We've got a bunch of other ingredients like Epsom salt and pink Himalayan salt as well included in the kit, and so are candles and Palo Santo. So if you are interested in being drawn for the raffle, please just leave your name in the comments. Just say me, and I'll go ahead and generate that before we close, and then I'll reach directly out to you for your information so I can go ahead and send that out. Thank you so much for your time, everyone.
Now you know everybody about to say me.
I know.
soon as you said just say me, me. I just see it. The chat just hopping. I need to type me in the chat too. So yeah, Iris dropped the website because that sounds like a lot of good products, and definitely want people to be able to check them out, whether they even if they don't win the raffle, still go check them out so that you can get some stuff for yourself. Yeah, a lot of good stuff. Let me type me in the chat. So yes, for our other panelists, do you have anything that you want to plug, or just anything else you want to say? And then while we're doing that, LaShawn, you can generate what you need to generate, and then just let us know when you're ready.
I would like to mention I'm not really on social media. It's something that I've been definitely transitioning to since COVID, but I offer astrology readings and divinations using cowrie shells and cards, and also herbal consultations, nutritional consultations, and long distance healing. And I'm also, I also teach traditional African and Black American herbology. That's Southern root medicine, voodoo, Egyptian medicine, my native medicine, and Nigerian medicine too. I cover a few tribes, and I'm trying to move everything online. And I'm also getting ready to facilitate sound baths, group sound baths online. So I believe my my Instagram is up. So if you follow me, all the information should be up soon, within the next couple weeks. If you do want to stay tuned or tap in, I'll also put my email address. That's a very direct way that you can get in touch with me, and I can let you know when different classes are coming up, or if you want to inquire on a consultation.
So your email would be the best way for now to contact you if someone wants like a direct service prior to everything being on Instagram, because we do have the Instagram and everything, but that's going to be the best way.
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Do any of our other panelists want to chime in about any of the services that they offer and other ways besides social media and email that we've posted to get in contact with them? This would now be the time, or even if projects you're working on to bring into fruition that you haven't exactly had a chance to create, let the collective know, speak it to the universe.
Any thoughts
we can
or
keep an
anything?
eye out on you.
Yeah, any final remarks, thoughts, any of that stuff is fine. I know we still have Ayotunde.
Folks, can you hear me?
Oh, yeah. Okay, we hear you now.
Hi. So just wanted to remind folks again that I coach activists, coaching them and supporting them in having their values, their self-worth, and their capacity respected in movement work. So kind of like what I was sharing earlier, how do we make sure that our actual life has the best versions of ourselves? How do we make sure that we're present in our life? How do we make sure that we're not sacrifices to movement, which is what a lot of us have been socialized to do? And how do we make sure that our community organizations, where we work, all these places hold the responsibility of our self-care, and that self-care isn't just something that we do on the side if we happen to survive to capitalism another day. And so for folks who are wanting to harness tools, deepen their access to themselves and setting those boundaries for work and activism, I would love to work with you. And so folks can follow me on Instagram, and folks who follow everybody else on Instagram and found about this space, then you already know what my Instagram is. So just click on my bio. Ooh, there's some thunder. So yes, ancestors. But if you click the link on my bio, you can book a session. And right now I have discounted sessions through the end of the year to support leaders who are navigating the pandemic and the uprisings. And it's not about like this, you got to prove that you're navigating. I know that you are, so it's just discounted. There's no code. So just feel free to book a session, and I would love to work with you all.
I dropped my Instagram in the chat. It's iokuku. As far as anything work related, you could hit me up through Gender Health Center. That's where I work at. In terms of things like counseling, things that have to do with gender identity changes, whether you're going through legal transitioning, medical transitioning, just needing counseling, or getting connected to queer community in Sacramento specifically. But even abroad, if you just need resources in California or just need to know about things, definitely hit me up. I'm kind of broadening my scope to Black queer folks specifically and figuring out like who we got in the city. Because one thing is that's kind of complicated being accessible when we're all kind of spread out and there isn't any central hub for us to know where each other are. We kind of just know each other by ear and when we meet at events and social media. And so it kind of gets hard to know who really is out here. And I know there's hella Black hood queer people too that we just aren't reaching when it comes to spaces like these. And I'm not in hood spaces, so I'm never gonna, be able to reach that. And so yeah, just trying to be more accessible and, build up our community. As far as like projects that are being worked on, I am developing a program specifically for queer people of color in Sacramento to have resources and to have a space that's inclusive to them and a space that is not including white queer people, which is something that we often don't get to have, especially in Sacramento. I have a $10,000 budget for that program. I was given a grant by the California Endowment specifically for me to develop this program, and I made it and gave it to them and they accepted it. And I have further support because I have 10K now. I have a guaranteed 10K next year already, and the program hasn't started yet. I'm actually still in development, and I'm finishing up the development. Probably in about another month or two, it's going to launch.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Seriously, that's awesome.
And that program is going to reach out to a lot of, because it's for the Tay youth. It's for folks who are unaware. When people say Tay youth, when it comes to kind of nonprofit language, that means anyone who's from 15 to 25. And so even myself, I'm only 24. I'm considered a youth when it comes to the Tay demographic. And so I'm going to be developing and kind of partnering with other people to kind of expand what we can do for the, Black queer community and just for people of color in general that we don't normally have with what money I currently have within the budget, and kind of planning out, virtual spaces and listening sessions. Like one of the very first things once I launch it is I'm going to have a listening session and I'm going to have community tell me what it is that they want and what it is that they need, because I don't have the same background as everyone else. And I tend to be a lot more privileged than a lot of my peers in terms of people who are Black and queer for a variety of reasons. And so I don't have the same struggles or know all the issues. And I don't pretend to know them. And so I want people to tell me like what it is, like what am I missing? Like how can I help you? Let me know what it is that people, either my organization or other organizations, haven't served you in the past, and how can we fix that with what we have now with this program? Like what can this program address and what can it not? And so the plan is to have a listening session and take the information back, figure out what we can and can't do, and bring that back to the implementing. And so I created the program in a way that I'm creating the foundation of what the program is, but I've made space for community to create the program with me as well. And so that's kind of what that's looking like right now. I definitely will keep folks updated as that continues. But yeah, that's all I have for now. Oh, and the name of that project is Queer Youth of Tomorrow, also known as QYT from Gender Health Center. So you will be seeing that come out soon.
Oh, that's awesome.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing, everyone.
So Iris, can you give some information about BWU? I know a lot of folks on the call already know about you all, but some folks are more so from the podcast, so they may not be as familiar. So can you give some info?
Yes. So BWU is a nonprofit organization. As I said previously, for those who may not have heard, it basically started out as a response to the White Women's March that happened a few years ago. And the original co-founders, which is Alika Bernard, Amani Mitchell, and Autumn Astor, came together and decided to amplify their voices in creating the Black Women's March that we have every year. Unfortunately, due to COVID, we weren't able to have that march this year, but we were in person, but we did have a virtual march. And it was able to open our eyes is that we can reach so many people who can't come in person, who don't have the capacity, energy, or even the means to come to a march because it does happen in the summertime, so they can still share space with us. What BWU is trying to consistently do in the community is to create opportunities for Black women, Black queer folk to be able to come together to create community regarding uplifting our people. And one of the ways that we do that is for our Black Girls Matter portion of our programming, which basically we do a Zoom just like this, and we have Black girls from the ages of about 10 to 17. Not only we collaborate with them to create the program that we then unveil to the audience, but we also take time to figure out what it is they want to talk about. They are involved with creating the games to help entertain the audience. And that is just something that's going to help build community and leadership within and instill that in our Black girls. Although Black Women United is very much so focused on the advancement and upliftment of Black women and Black femmes, we also want to make sure, and Jan, you can also chime in at any time if I'm forgetting any key points. We also want to make sure that we're able to reach different parts of our community. So we want to make sure that we're servicing different age groups. We also want to make sure that we're not just servicing the college graduate Black women and Black folk, the educated or the corporate job. We want to make sure that we are targeting Black women of all different intersections. And then we also, speaking of budgets, we're also trying to plan for our portion that's called Black Queer and Here, which so specifically focuses on the needs of the Black LGBTQ community and how best to continue to integrate support for them while also creating programs that we're working on now. You can go to our website, and I'm going to drop that down if you want more information. And we're always taking on volunteers for people who are interested in helping out the community. As the community outreach director, I'm always looking to get in touch with people such as Javia to collaborate on bringing important discussions such as this to the community so that they have access to it. And I will be dropping our website down below, so you guys can go take a look at it and get updated on what we do. And I think for me, with being in Black Women United, I just want to make sure that all Black women are heard, seen, and uplifted, especially for our dark-skinned Black women, our Black women who are rocking, their curly, kinky, coily hair. I just started my locks about 2 weeks ago, so y'all locks are looking gorgeous. Yes, so I am just honored to be able to share spaces and have safe spaces that are created for our community to discuss different disparities and what we go through. I think that's imperative towards community healing and community upliftment. If we don't have safe spaces such as these for us to talk, and not only to get information, but to pour back into each other, my mind is going blank, but that's what I aim to do. So if anyone wants to collaborate, I'll also be reaching out to Hadiza, Ayotunde, Bianca, Javia. Eventually COVID hopefully will be over, and I would love to get you down here to get that live podcast audience going, because we do have a space for it. It's not safe right now, unfortunately.
Correct. Like we have all the things except for, the lack of coronavirus.
Yes, and I would love to see a workshop with Javia and Ayotunde on boundaries. I'm definitely down to always share information of people's events going on through the BWU social media and Facebook and Instagram. Also, shout out to Cheyenne. I don't think she was able to make it. Javia and Aya. I'm sorry. Javia and Aya workshop. I would love to see that too.
Not just me.
Okay. So
both of them.
I would love to, yes.
all of the above.
All of the above. But just so I don't take up too much of anyone's time, I think that it's imperative right now that we are at home to figure out how we can not only connect with our community, put each other on, support each other, love each other, and share what each other is doing. Because at the end of the day, what Javia is doing isn't going to take away shine from what anyone else is doing. It's going to just amplify our collective health and wellness. So I just want to say once again, thank you to Javia for helping, and just, I feel like a lot of the work she did to help bring it together was imperative. And I want to say thank you to Cheyenne, our graphic designer, for the flyers and the promo. Thank you to Jan for always making sure we stay organized and we keep it together. Thank you to our panelists for just taking the time out of your day to share with us and love on us and each other. And thank you to LaShawn at Radiating Love for sponsoring our raffle. I also want to check in. LaShawn, are you ready to drop to see who the winner is, or do you want to check in with them later?
No, I'm actually ready.
All right.
So
okay.
Drum roll.
I don't even know if you can hear me drumming on my the winner is Sarah. So I'm going to, yay! Congratulations, Sarah. So I'm going to send you a DM so I can get your information, so I can go ahead and create this package for you and then send it off to you. I want to thank Javia and BWU for opening this space up to me. Thank you for the panelists for sharing your knowledge and your time with us. And if you are interested in following Radiating Love, we are on Instagram at radiating1, the number 1 love. Or you can hop to the website, www.radiating-love.com. Just a dash, no spelling it out.
It is in the chat too. Iris did put it in the chat. Yeah.
Yes, it's also in the chat. But I just want to, again, thank you everyone for your time. And if you are interested in having me work on something specifically for you, you can just go to my website, go to the Contact Us page, and then we can chat and I can work on that. I'm happy to create whatever I can, use my knowledge to specifically help a customer out for their ailments, and also provide that to the community as well. So just wanted to mention that too.
So thank you to everyone who has been involved in making this a reality. I have been wanting to do a live episode for a while, and kind of got thrown off by the pandemic, but still a virtual live is still a good thing. It's still good to see people's faces and to have the engagement in the chat. So yeah, we have for the podcast. So I will be releasing this as an episode, and so the video that we're on right now will be on the BRQ YouTube channel. So it's just if you search for Black Radical Queer on YouTube, it should come up. And that way you'll be able to see the actual playback. But for the audio will also go to YouTube, because my the host that we use, that my producer uses, will automatically push it out to there. So it'll be like an audio version. I'm gonna try to get captions on it if YouTube cooperates with me. And then there will be the visual too. And then also the actual episode itself, the audio should be available across all streaming platforms where you get your podcast. So to my knowledge, every platform I've looked at has had my podcast, so it will be on there and you'll be able to listen back to it. You'll be able to share it. I will just need some time to get everything uploaded. So probably within the next week or so, you should see it pop up, and then you'll be able to access it that way. As far as upcoming things for BRQ, I actually am going to, well, for those who listen to the podcast, they know that I have, there are some themes sometimes that I reference on the podcast. So sometimes I do episodes that are around, that revolve around mental health. And then there are some that I do call couples therapy that I do with my wife. We talk about different relationship things, as well as just like social justice. So we have, the most recent one was like pandemic and protest, where we just talked about kind of like being in quarantine and protests going on and stuff. We did one that was more specifically about like relationships and love and all that. And we talk about like our relationship and also just relationship stuff in general. And I thought it was something important because we don't have a lot of representation in media just for like queer love. We see a lot of love stories that are about straight folks, that are about white folks, and even a lot of the stuff that I find that is queer specific is white. And so one of the things that I'm doing for an upcoming project is, which you all are going to be the first to know outside of my wife, is I'm going to be doing this series called Click. Click by BRQ. Click is QLIC, and it's Queer Love in Color. And it'll be focused on relationships, romantic relationships by queer people of color, poly relationships too. So not just like monogamous or whatever, but any type of loving, romantic relationship, however those folks define it. And everybody isn't necessarily in a relationship. There will be single people too, but we'll be talking about love and relationships, and also that the connection between that and social justice and representation. So this came about from me really trying to seek representation of like queer couples and wanting to see like folks in long-term relationships, folks have homes together, folks, just all this type of stuff. And that I see for straight folks all over the place, and I see for white folks, but I was not seeing for people of color. And I wanted to see that. And so I went to YouTube. And so YouTube, of course, has all these vloggers, and that's where I was able to find like other like Black lesbian couples, other Black queer couples, other like Black and brown. Like I was able to finally see that. But so I want to bring more of that and kind of have more insight and speak to a range of folks, different ages, different races and stuff like that, but all people of color. And so we'll be having conversations about relationships and stuff like that, focused on different topics, and that'll be on the podcast. And so it'll, there'll be some more stuff that come with that I won't get into, but yeah, so I'll be specifically focusing on that. So it'll still be BRQ, but I'll have like a series. And so similar to me doing the couples therapy series, or way back, we used to do a Mind on My Melanin thing that was about mental health. So that's that. So yeah, I want to thank you all again for being involved, all of our panelists for sharing their knowledge, because you all are all badasses, and you bring like, everybody just kind of brings all their own stuff to the table. And so it's really awesome to be able to pull from such a diverse pool of resources. So it's been really awesome to be able to share space with you all. Thank you to Radiating Love, because I'm all about the goodies, and I'm about to get on their website because I've been spending a lot of money this quarantine. So I'm going to spend some more on Radiating Love. So
we appreciate you.
I've been spending money, a lot of Black-owned businesses, and I'm all for it. Yeah, so I really appreciate you all. So just give me a few days so I can like do the behind the scenes stuff with releasing this, and then I'll have it out to you so that you can share it and you can, go back to it if you would like.
Yes, and Javia, please do make sure you get that info to me so I could share it on the BWU social media networks as well, because we want to continue showing that love to you. So thank you.
So yeah, it'll be the same format. It'll just be the episodes will have that theme. So okay. So yeah, folks will see like as the episodes come out, it'll just kind of be like, okay, we're kind of just focused on this Click series, and I won't be doing too much more that strays from that for that particular amount of time. So but don't nobody know but y'all.
Okay, well,
I've been keeping it on the low for a while. Yeah. I've been just working on it. So yeah, so y'all, hopefully it'll be something that you all can enjoy and feel like it speaks to you and like it's representative. And if you're interested in even being on, then you can let me know, because I did do like a call for like, hey, if there are any like queer couples of color or queer relationships of color, and y'all are like, y'all want to be on the podcast and chop it up with me or chop it up with me and my wife, and we can just, talk our shit and have a good time. And also speak to kind of how we navigate this love thing in the midst of, in a larger context of social justice, because it is radical. And for like my wife and I, is this whole concept of social justice is such a cornerstone of our relationship. It's not separate at all. And so I want to be able to talk to other people about that too. So yeah. All right, y'all. Well, it has been real. Thank you to everybody involved, and be on the lookout for this stuff to come out on social media so you can access it again if you would like. As they say in the Black Southern Church, are all hearts and minds clear?
Indeed.
All right, y'all. Well, thank you so much, and enjoy the rest of your Sunday.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Happy Sunday, everyone.
Bye.
Black Radical Queer is a ManeHustle Media podcast hosted by Javi and Nicole. BRQ is produced and edited by Charmaine Fury, and the show's theme music was created by The Brothers Records. You can connect with us on Twitter or Instagram at Black Rad Queer. That's BLK RAD QWR. You can also connect with us on Facebook through the Black Radical Queer Podcast Facebook fan page or the BRQ discussion group. You can get Black Rad Queer merch on teespring.com/Black Rad Queer, BLK RAD QWR. And you can leave a voicemail, call in, ask a question, those types of things on the BRQ Google Voice line. And that number is 937-601-8647. ManeHustle Media. Turn your side hustle into your main hustle.